Let's talk about the fact that this is the first podcast we've done in a long time, and this is the first one we've ever done in person.
Sitting in the same room.
I know. We started this podcast over 2 years ago now, and just doing it over Zoom on Friday mornings. Here we are, still Friday morning. We're back to it.
A little later though. You like this time better, don't you?
I like this time a lot more.
Yeah.
Although it's made me a bit of a morning person. But let's get into it, Matt. We're going to talk today about really optimizing appointment scheduling. So this is a problem that a lot of people who run any kind of service business where there's appointments that need to be booked and there's a calendar that needs to be filled. What kind of advice do you have for them?
It's the toughest thing in a business, right? Because you've got a product or you've got a service that you're offering that you make a certain amount off of each time you do it. And a lot of people are only looking at the profit per service. But then when they look at their profit per week, it's not at all what their profit per service would have suggested it should be. And that's because you don't get paid on gross margin per hour. You get paid on gross margin per week. And you need to book a number of hours and do that at the right price. And so it's amazing how many people are doing really good work, and just a couple of fumbles per week means that they're not making nearly what they thought they could.
Okay, let's dig into that a little bit more. What's the big problem that you see when you're talking to clients who run businesses that are really dependent on filling and maximizing a calendar?
Hey, look, you're asking the most complex question first, so thanks for that.
Okay,
but if you look at it,
want to warm you up.
Yeah, thanks. If you look at it, any service offering has a number of different, any business has a number of different service offerings. Okay, so they put that in the calendar. They make more off of some, less off of others. So, the first thing is, do you know the ideal mix that would maximize your return per week? Okay. We're already assuming that you have 4 or 5 services that everybody loves. You have clients who are coming in. Great. You could do a bunch of them. But do you know, with your current mix of resources, what the ideal mix per week would be in order for you to maximize return?
When you say mix, what do you mean exactly? The type of service or the type of customer?
Yes.
Okay. Well, one of those.
Right. But no, like you've got, there's different
Let's say
services.
You're a physio or somebody in the health space. Is it like, different levels of services or 1 hour versus 30 minutes? Like, how would that look?
Well, look, everything revolves around your minutes when you're in professional services. And are you working at the top of your license continuously? So are you working at the top of your skill set, or are you playing down? And whenever you're out of pattern for any mix that you deliver, what happens is the people who are at the top of their game have to play down, which means they're not maximizing their minutes. And normally when you're not maximizing your minutes, you're not maximizing your profitability. So I take a look and go, okay, like, how many different services do you offer? How many are being bought? So this is the other thing. Like, it's one thing to dream about what world of ideal mix you want, but it's another thing to say, okay, what's the market buying from me? And you start to look at it and go, okay, how do I optimize my business for the ideal mix that I'm getting per week? So look, if you go to physio, you probably have 2 or 3 different offerings within the physio world. And the question becomes, are you maximizing how you can bring the appointments in? So take a physio, for example. They could run a fitness class with that 1 hour they have, and they could have 20 people in there, and they could be making, let's call it 50 times 20. So you're making $1,000 for that hour. That same hour could be in turn a single client where they could make 60 to 120 for that hour. That physio is the same hour, but the return to the business is 1,000 versus 100. And the issue you run into is go, okay, well, how do I want to use my hours? And go to one in between there. I mean, if a physio really looked at it, you could turn around and go, I'm going to have a couple of kins with me who can make sure they do the exercises. So now I can take that hour and I could maybe see 2 or 3 clients, support it by kins. Now that hour becomes $300 or $400. So every business has to figure out, what does your business turn around? And normally in professional services, it is the hour and the skill. And am I maximizing the skill per hour? And too often when you look back at the weeks, I'm spending way too many minutes out of position, way too many hours doing stuff that doesn't require my skill set. But I'm doing it because I sold a mix of work, and the way that I'm deciding to deliver to that mix of work is not optimizing my skills. And as a result, you're leaving dollars on the table every week. And that's the most difficult thing with professional services, is you can't get the minutes back. So unlike SaaS, unlike product, it's not like 1 week you can sell 1,000 hours and the next week you can go back to 40. I mean, you have the rate limiting factor is your hours times skill. And so I always ask, what is the best hour you do? Right. And in that case that I just gave, that class that they do, that class of 20 that they do where they make $1,000 is the best hour return they have. Okay, great. How many of those can we do? Because, think about it. They could, if 1 hour's worth $100 or it's worth $500 or it's worth $1,000 and you're spending 90% of your time in the $100 thing, you got to ask yourself, why are you doing that? Because you could work 100 hours at $100 an hour, or you could work 100 hours at $1,000 an hour.
Is it about just finding people who can offer that service at a cheaper rate, like the people running the group classes, for example, so that you as the owner don't need to worry about it? You can just find somebody to plug them in.
Look, this is when you go to look to scale. Now that I decide how much of what do I want to do and I look at what I'm going to scale, now I go, what kind of resources do I need? Because look, you can't just do fitness classes. You could, maybe you could, but most times physios are talking about initial consults, so I can do one-on-one assessments, and then I have individual treatment plans, so you're getting exactly what you need. And then the fitness classes are probably a preventative measure or a strengthening measure, if you will. They're probably not the only thing you're going to buy from a physio. So you often have to have the suite of offerings. The issue with the suite of offerings is way too often I get caught doing the work that doesn't bring me the return. So I end up a busy fool. And this is what, and I don't say that with any disrespect. I've been a busy fool many times in my life where you end up doing work that doesn't require your skill because that's the work that's coming in through the door.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I've been in that boat as well. I used to run an agency. That was my first business. And wow, I was doing things I shouldn't have been doing, like installing content management systems just because, I felt it was faster for me to do it. And I wanted to keep that busy work away from the actual hired developers. In actual fact, they should have been the ones doing that.
And that's why we step back with everybody and go, what's the business model? What does an ideal 12 months look like? What does an ideal month look like? Because some of these businesses have discrete seasonality, right? I mean, if you're in the pharmacy world, you don't do the flu shots every month. You do them when flu shots come out, right? October, November, et cetera. So you're going to have seasonality to your business. So how do you create a business model that mitigates seasonality, maximizes your use of time? And I say this all the time to technicians. Look, if you went to be a physio and you want to be a physio, that's awesome. But it doesn't mean you have to be a busy physio not making money. Yeah. What you want to do is step back and go, how does this thing also work for me?
So when I want to introduce the program, really, the Levership Program is really a rebrand of something that you've been running now for a number of years called FAST. And we'll get into the reason I introduce it is both to let listeners and people know that it exists, but also talk about how some of these problems get solved throughout the program. Can you talk about it?
The Levership Program was designed around what we came to see every business needing, right? So the Levership Program was designed to make sure you anchor a cadence. Military calls it a battle rhythm. People call it cadence of accountability, calendar of commitments, whatever it happens to be. But when do you stop as a business and scan way out and ask yourself the big questions? So why do I exist? What problem do I solve for who? What's the value of solving it? What's the financial model that's going to be the winning model for us for success? What am I building 10 years from now? Am I on my way to that? And so often, especially technicians who run businesses, they get caught up in the grind of just Groundhog Day, getting up and doing it again because it's what they know. So what Levership should do for organizations is act as a forcing function to ask the questions you know you need to ask yourself, but we never schedule it. We never actually do it. And all of a sudden you to put your head up and you're 6 months into a year and you're like, what was our plan again? What were we going to do? And you've mitigated 1,000 minor problems, but have we mitigated the right ones? So the point of Levership is to step back, ask yourself the hard questions about where you're headed as a business, what you're doing about it to get there, and then make sure that you settle on a set of actions that are going to get you there. A set of actions on the business, in the business, and from a resource standpoint. And of course, the benefit of doing it with us is twofold. One, you're paying for it, so you're going to show up. It's amazing. You're paying for it. You've anchored in the calendar, so you're going to show up. It acts as a forcing function for the discipline of just showing up. But I think the second reason is more important. We can ask you better questions. We've been in the arena with 1,000 people who look just like you.
So when we're talking about the scheduling issues, when somebody joins Levership, is there any kind of an audit that happens? So are people looking at their calendar, as it is today and sort of figuring out where they're spending that minutes? Because I think a lot of people may just not know offhand, right?
Generally, if you're in professional services, especially if you're in the world like vets or physios, et cetera, your calendar is pretty easy to get. You're booked into appointments with clients. That's part of it, but the most important thing is we do three things with you when we step back. The first thing is we look at that 12-month operational pro forma. So we look at it around hours, how many hours are you doing where, with what kind of clients, what's that return? Then we look at a customer rationalization exercise, probably needs a new name, but we look at what are your best customers, what are your worst customers? And what would happen if you got rid of the bottom 10% of your customers and you replace those with your top 10% customers? How much more profitable would your business be? So the conversation around what's the right fit for you. And this is a huge problem for small businesses. And then the third thing we look at is pricing and positioning. So just by doing those three exercises, you start to frame out the business you have versus the business you want to have.
Gotcha.
And that's the introduction to going, okay, now I can see the different levers in my business. I can see what I'm doing today. I can start to articulate what I might do tomorrow. And, any good improvement plan, any good strategy basically starts to solve the gap between what you want to be and what you are.
And what kind of results have you seen from clients when they've applied this, when they've started to filter out the bad work? Like, what does that actually do for them?
Most in the pre-exercises, most get the ROI of the entire program. Because what you're doing right away is you're truly understanding the levers of your business. So that operational financial forecast, that pro forma that we do with you, gives technicians a totally different understanding of their business. I mean, we just got done doing one where the woman looked at me and she goes, "This just looks like magic," because her financials had always been given to her by an accountant, but she had never connected them to the hours and the type of client she had and how much control she actually had over that set of financials. So what we do is take the financials out of the hands of the accountants. Don't get me wrong. They're extremely important. You got to pay your taxes. They do the final audit for you. That's all very important. But I want a business owner to be controlling it based on the controllables, not on the outcome of the controllables. So she just looked and said, "This is absolute magic. I actually can see my business. I see what matters. I see what I need to do." And then looking at your customers through the lens of what's the right fit for you, right? I mean, I don't believe there are bad customers. I do believe there are bad fits. Mm-hmm. So, and these small entrepreneurs, just because you can do everything doesn't mean you should. And so how do you step back and go, this is what I really need to do? Because look, when you start a business as an entrepreneur, you say yes to everything and then you just try and figure it out. The next step is saying, okay, I can do a lot of things, but what am I actually going to focus on? So that I can become really clear to the market that I'm addressing. This is who I work with, and this is the value I unlock.
I fell into that trap so much running an agency, in my earlier years is you take on every industry, every size customer who comes knocking, whether you're good at serving them or not. And even if they have services that you don't necessarily offer, you say yes to them because if you can't figure it out, I'll find somebody who can and subcontract them. And it never really amounted to anything much. We were never very good at the work. And it was usually just a distraction.
Yeah. And you start to understand who are the customers that fit well. They love what you do. They keep coming back. They refer others to you. You start to really see what matters. And this woman that we were working with just the other day, when we went from the operational pro forma or the financial forecast to that customer exercise, for the first time, she realized that one of the customers that was a little bit more difficult to deal with because they were going through a transition was actually the single most important client to her business. She had seen them as individual jobs before, but now she actually saw this one client brought 25% of her revenue. And she hadn't really realized that because she was working off the jobs, not the clients that brought the jobs. So you got to see that connection. How many clients do I have? How many jobs do they bring me? And, you know, in the health world, you actually take it a step further and you start to look at your key relationships, because if you sort of filter back from all the clients you're getting, you're going to see that there's some common referral sources. And you start asking yourself the question, am I taking care of those referral sources? Do those referral sources understand what I truly do? Maybe they're the ones I need to help set up the value, because when it comes to health, you know, let's call a spade here. We don't normally know what we need. We're seeking guidance. We got to sort back. Is it our core? Is it our leg? What we don't really understand our body. So we're seeking guidance on that journey, and we're trusting a couple core people. Well, if you're a physio, how are you getting those customers? Where are they coming from? Who's sending them to you?
Does that become a bit of a risk when you have a key relationship that represents 25% of your business and they go away? Do you advise people to try to diversify that more? Because it sounds like it's a lot of consolidation you're talking about. I think if you've been in business long enough, you understand that the bigger the client is, the more that they own you versus you actually having a business. 25% is starting to get close to the number that I get a little bit concerned about. But that is relative to every business, right? There's some businesses that do a lot of work with the government and they're 60, 70, 80% of their business. Yeah.
If you get into a place where someone is referring you more than 25% of your business, you better be damn sure that relationship is working for you. Right. So, you know, that lead up, the financial forecast, the customer analysis, and the pricing and positioning conversation, those three conversations generally give a series of lenses that the business owner hasn't looked at their business through before. And the more that you're, you know, a great physio that now owns a physio business, the less likely you've ever looked at your business through this lens. You're more likely to look at it through, how do I become a better physio, rather than how do I become a better business owner?
So we're going to dig into each of those topics in future episodes. I think that covers the scheduling for now. We'll get into a few other topics later on, but this is the relaunch of the Levership Podcast. And for anybody interested in the program, where should they go?
Fortunately, somebody told us we should buy Levership.com, so we did.
Levership.com. You can check out more about the program and apply to get into the next cohort at their cohort-based groups. And we have them every month, I believe.
Next one launches in October.
Okay. So not every month, but every 2 months for now. But we'll increase capacity as we go. All right. That's it. Bye for now. Thanks, everyone.